Yeah, now we are live. Perfect.
Open up the
As
group.
usual, we just give the people a few minutes to jump in and
Yeah.
go from there. So what are your plans for this year with your dogs?
I don't really know. I mean, I need to. I don't know. At least with Venger, I need to get a BH on him probably, but I'm not in a hurry, you know. So,
Do you go with the AKC
uh,
no? Or do you go for American Schutzhund, or is it like more IGP and not American Schutzhund?
IGP, yeah, DVG. But I am thinking about. I do have American Schutzen on my mind, just because I like the detection part of it. I like tracking too. I want to do that, but I like the detection part of it. And then I like that in American Schutzen, the dog can be a little bit crazier. A little more drive can leak through.
Yeah,
And, I mean, I know there's talent in cap and drive, but at the same time, I kind of like that craziness, the
a little bit
pushiness.
dirty.
Yeah, I like it. So, and American Schutzen, they it's not such a big deal. Like IGP, they dock you points for that. But with your
Yeah.
skill, it's give and take, I guess. But
So yeah, I think IGP tests the training skills of the trainer. And for example, like monitoring or ring sports in general, I think that these programs they test more the dog
yeah,
than the training skills. I mean, there's also a lot of training skills you need to train a dog in ring sports, but it doesn't have to be that perfection
yeah,
because they test a lot more the dog's nerves, the dog's
yeah,
drive, and all that. So
yeah. I think that um, like ring sports and PSA make a strong dog, but IGP makes a stronger trainer.
yeah,
Because it's so picky, and you have
perfection.
to. Yeah, and it's routine. So if everybody already knows the routines, then it's not um, can I complete the routine? It's can I complete the routine better than the next guy?
Better than anybody else. Yeah.
So I like that. So and I train a lot by myself, so it's easier for me to train that by myself as
Yeah.
opposed to. But man, I like other sports too, so I don't. I lean both ways. I don't.
Doesn't matter.
Is it
All right.
hot?
Oh, sorry.
Is it hot there?
Where I
Where?
live in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say because here it's like 28 degrees Celsius, and I have absolutely no clue how much Fahrenheit it
Oh,
is.
yeah. Gotcha. It's pretty hot here.
But yeah, it's hot at the moment, and you know that, and you notice that also with the dogs. I mean, my a little bit
Oh,
long-haired Malinois ex-herder, he's really struggling with the heat. But what can you do? Dog must do.
yeah.
All right. What do you think? Do we want to start?
Yeah. Might as well.
All right.
You just want to pop up the first. I'll let you lead off.
All right. All right, guys. Thanks for joining in today for our live Q&A about the NePoPo in general and a little bit more in depth. I'm Dominic, and I'm here together with my co-host Mike. Thanks for joining in. And yeah, I think we have had a very important and topic the last days from Mike, and I think we just start off with that. With the first question we had, it's like a perfect topic for today. It's a direct versus indirect reward system, and when and how to use it. That's a pretty good question related to your video you posted today.
Oh yeah. Do you want me to just take off with it or?
I mean, you have a perfect video about that already, so go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah. So I guess. So man, I got several different. Man, some people are irritated by putting importance on direct versus indirect, and like it doesn't matter. And then on the other end, there's people who are kind of intrigued by it. And I think that the people who don't, the people who are just kind of like, it doesn't matter, it's no big deal. I think they don't really understand the power of it, the importance of it, the difference that it can make in your training. And this all goes back again to for me, the dopamine effect. I'm going to turn my phone off. If there's a what if in the scenario, if the dog doesn't know, it's the whole reason you wrap, for those that celebrate Christmas, it's the whole reason that gifts are wrapped before they're put under the tree, right?
Yes.
If you walked out and you saw every present that was under the tree and you knew what it was, then nobody's jumping up to get up early just to see what it is. There's no anticipation, and so there's no kind of passion built into it. But if with everything wrapped and you don't know what's there, it just adds a little more attitude to the scenario, right? Same thing with the dog. If the dog always knows what it's going to get, then it always knows what it's not going to get, and it can balance that in its mind. Do I want to do this behavior or do I not? Do I if I know what I'm going to get and it's not really of much value to me, if I already know the paycheck is not valuable enough.
So a little bit like a predictable and unpredictable reward, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the same thing with what's direct. A dog can see what's direct, and so it knows what's there. And now it knows, if it doesn't know if it's going to get it knows if it's going to get a jackpot. It knows if it's going to get just a little bit, and it can adjust its performance based on the paycheck that it sees.
Yep.
And if a dog doesn't know, then there's always that what if. And so if I don't do this behavior, if I know that there's a chance I might get a jackpot, then I'll do the behavior with passion. I'll do it real fast because I'm anticipating. I don't know what's there,
Yeah.
And also, if that's where we can build frustration in the dog, which will build we can elevate behaviors and make them faster and make them, just more on point by building a little frustration into the behavior. So the dog thinks it's going to get a jackpot. I tell it to down, it downs real fast, and I give it a few pieces of kibble, or if it downs not quite as fast, I give it a few pieces of kibble or whatever. And then the dog's like, what the heck? So the next time he may do it with just a little bit more umph. Now I can jackpot that, so the indirect reward is where that comes in, because the dog never knows what it's going to get. So, man, I've been talking about direct and indirect for the last 2 days. I feel like I'm dreaming in it. So I'm probably leaving stuff out or saying too much. So
basically, from my understanding, I don't want to push that too much up, because I think it's important to know the differences between direct and indirect reward. But I mean, you can always overthink things, and you can go very, very deep inside the theory part, like we did with Curabell in Gold School. But from my understanding, just a direct reward, for example, like food or a toy, is a reward that the dog really, really wants and can see. So like we already mentioned in our another podcast, and that creates more focus. And I think you can also call that a little bit luring, because it's the same with when you do luring for the heeling position. You have your food in your hand and you lure the dog through in the behavior through the motions. And that creates very happy dogs, because the dog can see what the reward will be, and he doesn't have to be a gambler, like you said, with the indirect reward. And in that case, in a direct reward system, the direct reward makes the behavior. For example, like you said, or like you did on your video, you put the ball under your arm, the dog looks up in perfect heeling position, sits down, shuts the mouth, and then you just let the ball drop, or you click whatever you want to do. And that means that the ball that the dog can see and is looking up, that makes the behavior of the perfect heeling. And then you just reward with the ball. So am I wrong? I mean, that's for me, that's a perfect example, a short explanation of what is a direct reward. And in comparison to that, we have the indirect reward, which can also be food or a toy, because that's the most common things we use, is a reward. Also, the dog has to, so the dog needs to, sorry for my bad English today. So that is a reward the dog wants, but it's a reward the dog cannot see. So it's invisible for the dog. And this will create a lot more concentration for the dog, because the dog has to see, okay, what do I have to do to get the marker, to get the reward I cannot see? And we use that the most of the time in, for example, in shaping exercises. I do that most of the time in shaping exercises. I have my food in my pockets, or for example, a ball, or I have the manners mind in my food machine. And when the dog does something good, what I want, hit in the clack, going around the stick, I mark that and I give the dog. Dog comes back to me and I give him some food, or he comes back and I give him the ball. And that's also creates more stability in the dog. And in comparison to the direct reward, is the indirect reward makes the behavior coming. So the behavior becomes the bridge for the dog to get the reward he wants.
Yeah.
So that's basically my understanding of direct and indirect reward.
Absolutely. I saw a comment on here that I thought was pretty good related to that. And I'll just pop it up here. It's very difficult to improve a behavior with a direct reward. So that depends on how you look at that, but I think I'm interpreting that question the right way. And that's interesting. It's difficult to improve a behavior with a direct reward. So it's difficult to get a dog to put more passion into a behavior, or to get the dog to be independent in a behavior with a direct reward. 100% true, because the dog is focused on just what you just said. The dog's focused on the reward rather than the behavior. So
and I also think, sorry.
No, yeah, go. You're good.
And I also think the dog, maybe, I don't know, but I think when the dog already sees the reward, there's no need for the dog to perform better, because he already sees the reward and it's not going away when he does bad. So it stays there till he does good, but he won't improve because he already sees the reward right in front of him.
That's a good point.
So that could also be a good explanation of that.
All right.
So where do we have the other question? Because I don't want to talk that till we die, but
all right. So just move on to the next one, I guess.
I mean, it's on one side it's very simple, and on the other side you can make it very complicated.
Yeah, but, absolutely. Yeah, and that's 13 minutes already, so there's several more questions. So we could move on.
So that's a question. Maybe that's because English is not my mother language, but the question is how to make a transition between direct and indirect reward. And I'm not sure what that means 100%.
So, like for me, I did that in the video. So I started off with direct reward, and I made the illustration where I had a ball in my hand. I was looking for a ball. I know there's a bunch around here, but I had a ball in my hand, right? I'm going to grab one.
Yeah, take your time. And yeah, just for you guys in the comments, we don't see who's posting the comments. So in the link, under the StreamYard link there you can click on that link, and it will give StreamYard the permission to use your name in the live stream, so we can actually see who's posting that question, because otherwise it just looks like that Facebook user. And if you give StreamYard the permission, we will see who's posting the question, and we can address your names directly.
Yeah. So take the ball, right? And the dog, so my dog, it's hard, it's opposite on here. So my dog's looking, he looks at the ball, right? Just for a second. And then I mark it, I click, and then throw the ball. So I'll do that a few times. And it's just the explanation that I made in the video. And then so eventually the dog's looking at the ball and he's anticipating it. So he'll hold it a little bit longer, and then boom, I click, throw the ball. Then he's looking at it a little bit longer, right? Direct reward to him, he thinks. So he's looking at the ball, and I click, but this time instead of throwing that ball, I pull another ball out and throw that. So that would have been an indirect reward. The dog actually, it starts off as direct, right? But the dog's looking at what he thinks is the reward, kind of. So this is in the process of bridging it. But when I click, then I pull the other ball out and throw it. I mean, it could be anything. It could be your hand. You hold your hand up and the dog looks at your hand, you click and then pull the ball out and throw it. That would be indirect. But that's how I would transition, right?
Like a target, you mean? You mean like a target with your hand? The dog looks at the target because... Yeah, okay.
Yep. So it would be the same thing transitioning like in the heel position. If you're luring, I don't do a lot of alluring unless some pet dogs, but with my sport dogs, I don't. But let's just say for the sake of the argument, if I was going to fade a direct reward away and I'm using kibble in my hand, right, or some food in my hand, I have them in the heel position, and at first, let's just say I have a piece of kibble in my hand, right, and I'm luring the dog in the heel position, and he's muzzling my hand, and I click, or just give him the reward. Don't have to click because he's already there. But let's just say I click, give him the food, click, give him the food, click, give him the food. Well, eventually he would muzzle because he thinks the food's there. Maybe I even have some food there, and he's got his muzzle in my hand. But I click, but I don't give him that food. I pull some other food out and give him that. And then I do that a few times, and the dog's just eventually I don't have to put food in my hand, right? But I hold my hand the same way, and he muzzles my hand, and then I click and then feed out of my food pouch. And so that's one way of fading from direct to indirect. If you could do the same thing in a box, I have my computer sitting on top of my dopamine box here, so I was looking for it, and it's right in front of me. But you got the box, right? The dogs, you throw food in the box, and the dog's going in after it, and then eventually the dog goes in after it. There's no food in there, but he goes in because he's used to going in for it. But when he gets his head in there, he realizes there's nothing in there. But as soon as his head goes in, boom, you throw food in. That was indirect. So, or he puts his head in going after the food because he thought it was in there, and you click, and he comes back to you and gets his reward. Indirect.
So it's basically based on anticipation for the dog, because you make the dog think, or you trick the dog from direct to indirect reward later. Because later you want to fade that lure or the ball or whatever you have as a direct reward. You want to fade that away, because we want to, me as a sport dog trainer, and you also, we train for trials, and in the trials you don't have something to lure. I mean, there's always ways, like Bart always says, always ways to cheat, but you gotta make that So
I think it was Michael and Bart that made the explanation one time, and I don't know if it was a video or if it was at school, or can't remember, but they were using a ball under their arm and talking about how you fade, it was a squishy ball, and how you could fade that was the ball sees it, but eventually you just kind of close your arm so that it can't be seen, and at that point it becomes indirect, if the ball if they can't see it. So
that's a really good question. And we have another so basically it's two questions, and the one question I would say we do a separate podcast about, and it's about the proper application of tools. And I think we will make a separate podcast where we show you guys all the tools we are using, or we are using when it's allowed in the country you're living in, because we always have to obey to the animal welfare law of your country. So we will explain what tools could be used, for example, in the USA, where everything is legal, and we show the tools, and we land on the free.
For now.
And we show the application, how you can use, or how we use those tools in a proper way, for humans and for the animal. And we will do a separate podcast about that, because that's a pretty interesting topic. There we can also talk about positive reinforcement, how that will look, in practical use, negative reinforcement, and the combination negative, positive, positive reinforcement. Yeah, and the other question is how not to PoPoNe a dog. That's interesting question because that happens a lot. People say there's also a video from Bart where he says people say to me, "Yeah, Bart, I train in NePoPo," and then he looks at their dogs and he sees they training PoPoNe, so that's a big difference.
Yeah, I see. I know a trainer that actually has. They're not a NePoPo trainer, but they've been to a few seminars maybe, and it's in their description on their website, and it says that they use this NePoPo, and they don't use the NePoPo. I can tell you what is used. It's PoPoNe, and basically the dog is positive reinforcement, positive reinforcement, positive reinforcement. You know, everything's a treat, 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 food, 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 food. And then uh, the dog messes up, and you can't fix that by, you're not going to give the dog a treat when it messes up to correct that behavior. I mean, that's just going to reinforce the behavior even more. So what happens is they go through all these scenarios training these behaviors, and then the dog messes up, they got to correct the dog, and so they punish the dog, right? Well, it's PoPoNe. You didn't teach the dog, haven't taught the dog what a correction means, haven't conditioned the dog to know what a correction means, and so now the dog, when the dog gets corrected, the dog, doesn't know how to interpret it. So um, can create flat dogs, dogs that are, they become more apprehensive when it's time to train because they don't know what to expect. Everything was going real smooth. Y'all were speaking the same language, and all of a sudden you change the language on the dog, and the dog don't know how to understand what's going on. So that's PoPoNe to me.
So from my understanding, it makes a huge difference in how you build up a dog. I mean, when we train or when I train new behaviors, especially with young dogs or puppies, I do most of the time I do positive reinforcement till I have a lot of hope in every exercise I want to train. And when I have a lot of hope, I mean, that's a sentence from Michael and Bart, I can prepare the dog for the correction that will come later. And when the correction later comes, the dog um, has to get out of disobedience and fly into the behavior that I told him before. But that needs a lot of preparation before. So you just can't go healing with luring or whatever, and then the dog, you lure away. When the dog looks away, you correct the dog with a leash or whatever. And I mean, that works somehow, and it worked for the last 60 years, but there are more and better ways to train that. So at first, for example, you do a shaping behavior like sit down, stand, and then you add the negative reinforcement. You lay that over these behaviors. At first, for example, you use it as an activator for go into the box. For example, when you do sit down, stand, and positioning box, you add the first negative feeling when you have a lot of hope, and you use that as an activator to go. And when the dog accepts that and he knows, okay, that means go, the negative reinforcement means go and not no, 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 then you can go into the next phase and use it as negative reinforcement, and therefore you can add the must key. You prepare the dog for the correction later.
Yeah.
And that's going to create dogs that are very strong in the mind. They can take the negative reinforcement that could lead later to a correction, but the dog understands the language of the negative reinforcement correction. So later the dog will not be frustrated and fearful of that correction because he knows, the correction means do better. That's wrong. And it's not just a correction without that makes the dog hopeless and doesn't know what to do and how to turn that off. So that's, for my understanding, the difference between PoPoNe and NePoPo. So you train and you build that dog up with the negative reinforcement that makes the dog understand to do and not to not do.
Yeah, that's a good way of explaining it. And So it's like a leash, right? You have a dog on a leash, and a dog that you just like you were talking about. You have a dog and you're walking on a leash, or it's in the heel position. It looks away, and then a dog that has been taught leash skills using um, NePoPo, right? You have a dog on a leash, put a little bit of pressure on the leash, as soon as the dog gives to the leash, boom, right? The pressure goes off and you reward it. So a dog that's been raised up like that, now he's in the heel position, right? He looks away, you tap on the leash a little bit. The dog knows that the tap on the leash means a reward, right? Because the pressure goes away and then the reward. So the dog he like you said, he flies back into the behavior, looks up back at you, in the focused heel, or if you're not in the focused heel, whatever you want the dog to do. That's NePoPo. So there's hope at the end. There's way more hope at the end than the pressure. Uh, the value of the hope is greater than the value of the pressure. But PoPoNe is on the opposite end of that. If my dog's healing, right, and then he's not, but he hasn't been taught what pressure means, except that it's just out of the blue pop, or I don't really know how to explain that, but you got your dog in the heel position. I'm talking about PoPoNe now. He's in the heel position. He looks away, and I'm frustrated, and so I pull on the leash. Well, opposition reflex. What's the dog going to do? Is look the other way. Or if you've done it 100 times, you pop on the leash, and the dog looks up, but now he's like, what the heck? My bad. But there's not going to be that heart and soul in it. There's not going to be that passion, because he knows he did wrong, and that's all there is to it. He did wrong, or he knows that you're coming at him for something that he did.
Yeah.
They may not know how to interpret it, but for sure there's not hope at the end of it. Whereas in NePoPo, you train the dog to a correction, so it takes a way less of a correction, just a little nudge on the leash, and the dog knows, boom, he can look up back into focus because there's hope
Yeah.
there, and he knows how to interpret it. He knows what it means. So,
Yeah, that's also my understanding. That's how that all works. Yeah.
all right.
So we have another question. Let me just look it up. It's also an interesting question, and it's how did going through the NePoPo schools affect the way of you training afterwards? Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
Yeah, if you want, or you can go ahead. You're doing way better
So,
than me. So,
I mean, I have been trained by my mentor and master coach, Patrick Lockett, before from House Amberg Shepherds. And he taught me a lot about NePoPo training because he's also a NePoPo Gold graduate and a Gold multiplicator together with his wife, Alicia Lockett. And they already taught me a lot about the system. And it made me understand dog training from the fundamentals to how to get a dog ready for trials. But as soon as I went in silver school together with you and Kirby and all the other guys, that made my whole world break down, because it was the theory we learned in depth, the 5 days with Michael and Bart. Man, that was brain torture in the beginning, and it took me a long time. I would say even after Gold School, it was, I think, 6 months later, 5 months later, which is pretty good, I think, because I think, in my opinion, you have to just let it sit down in your brain and in your mind what you just learned in NePoPo Silver School, because that's a lot of theory. You gotta just settle that down in your brain, think about it, and think twice, and think a third time, and then you have to try on your own with your dog before you go to the Gold School, because you got to know what you do when you go in Gold School. In my opinion, the Gold School should be testing what you learned before and what you did with your dog, and then you can better that together with the Gold multiplicator or whoever does the Gold School, and that makes a perfect training system. But yeah, I'm talking about something else right now. Sorry. So yeah, what they did with me, I'm a lot more aware of what I do. I think about what I do before I do it. I always plan my training sessions, and I also write that down. I write everything down, my training log, I would say. And yeah, it just turned my whole training 180 degrees, because now you know what you did before, maybe intentionally, but now you can explain and you know why, and that makes you able to analyze when something is not working and if something's working, and therefore you can make your own plan together on how you build up the NePoPo training system with your own training system, because everybody does apply NePoPo and all that a little bit different. And yeah, that's basically how that affected my training as a trainer. Yes.
Yeah. So for me, I think it slowed me down as far as not trying to get from point A to point B so fast. Um, I still get there as fast, right? But there's less pressure. And because once you know how to teach a dog to learn, then everything else, comes easy. And once you learn how to build ignition into the dog, everything else, it's just easier. And so I kind of molded my training around that. Also, it made me a gentler trainer. Like, so,
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's times in the past when I've had dogs and I'd get frustrated, and whenever I heard this statement a couple months ago, and I made this statement in a recent post again, but it's where knowledge ends, that's where frustration, begins. And man, after silver school and then after gold school, and then it took me even a little bit longer to let it soak in. It's still soaking in, but it makes me. I think the number one thing is that it makes me like you just said, it makes me analyze my training more with
Yeah.
my personal dogs and with pet dogs. It makes me be able to step back and say, why is this not working, or how can I change this, or how can I it makes me be able to diagnose the problem and to be able to figure out a different approach to that exercise. And before, it was just, that's the way it's got to be. I got to get these behaviors, and you see it in my older Mal now. She's a burnout, she's a good dog, and I can get her into drive, but I have to put forth a lot of effort to get her into drive.
Yeah.
And she don't just come through the gate wanting, looking for the game. And she's a perfect example of pre-NePoPo versus my other two young dogs now. They're in they've been raised in the system, and not perfectly, because I'm not Michael and Bart, and I've not been doing this for NePoPo for just a lifetime. But Miles, the difference is completely, two opposite ends of the spectrum. So both of those dogs, they want to do something. My dog Venger, he wants to work, and Legend now, thank God, he wants to work. So I never thought that day would come, but thanks to master coaching, Michael, she's got me there. So, man, I'm telling you, that dog pulled my hair out. It's silver. At this last new silver school,
Yeah.
Bart talked about how, Zot, their dog, was kind of a little bit difficult sometimes. And then so I'm thinking about Legend. I'm like, man, what am I doing with this dog? What am I doing with it? It should go to a better trainer. But anyway, so that's my experience. It's just changed. It's made me, so I'm an analytical person anyway, so I like that type of stuff. And so it fit perfectly with me, understanding what I was doing. But you don't understand what you're doing until
Yeah.
you think you do, and even positive reinforcement. So I had a message today from a lady that asked me, do you teach positive reinforcement? And before I'd have been like, no, sorry, but now I'm like, yeah, I can teach positive reinforcement better than most positive reinforcement trainers, other trainers do it, especially in this area. And I would say almost anywhere.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that because I'm not going to be arrogant, but I'm just saying there's a system and half the system's left out. And if they understand that system, then they're probably fantastic at that, at positive reinforcement. But
Yeah.
that's the thing about NePoPo. It takes the aspect of every type of training style, every legit training style, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, the combination of both, and it puts it in a system that leaves nothing out. So, and once you understand that system, you can flow through it, forward, backward. You can give the dog what it needs. Don't give it too much of this. Give it, it gives you the ingredients to be a master chef, I think.
Yeah, in the kitchen. So we have one last question, and that question is, what is the main difference between shaping and luring, and what is better? So in the beginning, I would say what is better. That also depends on your training style and on the dog you have in front of you. But basically, the difference between shaping and luring, I think that's pretty easy to explain, because when we do shaping, that's also operant conditioning, called operant conditioning, where we let the dog find out what we want or what kind of behavior we want to have from the dog on his own. So the dog must go and look and hunt for the behavior. And we just sit down or stand, whatever, and we mark what we want. So we mark our wanted behavior. And on the other hand, when the dog does something we don't want to have, we can ignore that, or we can stim that away, Michael and Bart would say. And that will create an innovative and free-thinking dog that uses his brain actively to search for the behavior and solve problems on its own. So that's basically what I would say is about shaping. And in comparison to that, luring is where you show the dog what he has to do with, for example, with a piece of food, with a ball, whatever. And like we said before, that makes the behavior, and that brings a very quick result. So, but it's not a real result, because the dog don't understand with luring in the beginning what he has to do. You just lure in the position, and mark that when you drop the ball, for example. That will bring a quick result. But oftentimes it happens that the dog just follows the lure, and he really doesn't think about what he's doing. So that's a little bit the disadvantage of luring. And you could just say, when you do shaping, there's an active dog and a reactive handler. And in comparison to that, when you do luring, it's an active handler and a reactive dog, because you lure and the dog reacts to that. I think that explains it. Very short, because I like short explanations. Pretty good. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think you left anything out there. Pretty.
I mean, we could also talk about the advantages and disadvantages, but I think that will do a little bit too much.
Yeah, I think you covered it.
But yeah, we have a question here. Here it is. So I have a 4-month-old puppy that screams when any leash pressure is applied. Some learning is hard, but trying my best to use the least amount of pressure with positive reinforcement. NePo. Any other experience with this type of puppy? What do you want to do?
Yeah. So if it was me, I would, like, if the puppy's in a crate, I would have a short leash, like maybe just a tab, right, that hangs down. And then anytime the puppy came out of the crate, I would put the leash on the dog and just let it walk around with it, whether it's in my whatever you're doing with the dog. And then, but every good thing would come after that leash was put on. Or you may just have the leash on your arm, looped on your arm while you're feeding out of your hand, right? And then slowly over, a few sessions, move the leash kind of down your arm and over the puppy's head, back off while you're feeding, over the puppy's head, back off. And then as far as the pressure, I think you just got to be subtle, right? Just a little bit of pressure, jackpot. A little bit of pressure, jackpot. And then
So that leash pressure becomes the signal
yeah,
for the jackpot, let's say.
counter condition, right?
So that would be basically not NePo, it would be NePoPo.
Yeah, pretty much.
Pressure negative,
Yep.
stop the pressure positive, and then you get the jackpot positive.
Yeah.
So a little bit desensitization of the leash pressure with a lot of hope, a lot of positive reinforcement.
Yeah. Make the hope.
Loves the pressure on the leash.
Yeah. Make the hope really kind of drown out the pressure, So, and then fade the hope. Let's see.
Top leash feed, put 2 leashes on one, dragging may distract from the one you're using. I think that's basically what you explained, right? Just hang leash, short one on the collar or harness, whatever you use, and just desensitize it on its own.
Yeah.
But I would also go with the way of making the leash pressure on the neck or on the harness, whatever you have, make that as the dog as a signal for the jackpot. So
Absolutely.
that sort of hope with really minimal pressure for a lot of hope.
Yeah.
I mean, it will take some time, but I think that's the easiest way to do if you have time. So that's just my opinion. What do you have here? Too much leash desensitization on pet dogs. Gotta know how tough we build those thresholds per dogs per job. Yeah, I mean that's also a good point. If you do too much leash desensitization, it could become later for the pet dog owner or pet dog handler can become a problem when you want to correct your dog with a leash and the dog is desensitized to the leash and to the pressure. So that can also be a problem. But therefore, Michael and Bart always say you're gonna know what type of dog you train and what type of gasoline you need for your dog. And therefore you have to make a training program to that specific dog and for that specific task.
Yeah, know when to stop it. Another way to do that is if you let's just say you're going to use an e-collar, right? So put the e-collar on the puppy. Very low, obviously, and almost imperceptible, and then stem jackpot, over a few sessions, stem jackpot, and then put the leash on the dog, stem jackpot, put the leash on the dog, stem jackpot, and then leash pressure, stem jackpot. Use your e-collar to condition the jackpot, and then just put the leash pressure in front of the stem. And just one way of doing it, but that's funny because you could do the same thing with an e-collar. A lot of people condition the e-collar. I do this too with some dogs. Stem and food, stem, food, stem, food. If you're not careful later on, the dog's not doing is you trying to use negative reinforcement to correct the dog. You stem, and the dog interprets the stem as a click, because it's stem food, click food, stem food. So you gotta know when to stop or when where that threshold's at, and that's just
the feeling you've got to have.
It is. That's the art of it. So I'm glad. I think Derek made that comment. It was a good point.
Yeah, but I mean there are always 1,000 ways to do, 1,000 ways to train, and you just got to find out what type of training fits your personality and what type of training fits the dog you got to train with that specific job. For example, a pet dog needs another treatment than a service dog, and another treatment than a sport dog, and a personal protection dog. So
yeah,
you got to know what to train for.
Right. All right. Was there any more questions?
I think so. I don't have any more questions from the group. So I think that's it. Other than somebody has a question in the chat, we are done for today's episode. I mean, we are 45 minutes already.
Yeah. Went by pretty fast, I think.
Yeah, really.
All right.
Yeah. Stay tuned for the next episode or maybe we do it in the next episode where we explain the tools you can use in the country where it's allowed. And that will also be, I think, a pretty interesting one. where we also explain positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, NePoPo reinforcement, it together, practical use on that tool we want to show.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good.
Good. Thank you guys for joining in.
Thanks for coming. Hopefully it helped.
And depending where you are, have a nice evening or a great day.